Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 114, a Designers Roundtable Special Edition. Hello, I'm Alan.
Hello, I'm Andrew. And I'm here as the dunce.
Yes. You are the only non-designer here.
Yes, I'm not allowed to play with crayons. No.
I used to be. I sold my soul. So yeah. So anyway, we're joined. This really for us is a chance to have a discussion with some friends of the show who I think have all been on Rear View. Car vehicle designers, and it's a chance to have some of those discussions that we keep popping up, but are somewhat limited by only being 140 characters at a time. So hopefully it's to allow people to actually have longer sentences, really. So Andrew and I are joined tonight by, in no particular order.
As long as we've sorted this before the show.
I'm glad you can tell, and I meant to actually do it. So we've got Nia Khan, Director of Design at Plasan. Say hello, Nia.
Hello. Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. From his very attractive car, Matteo Licata, who is an automotive designer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And we've got Lee Walton, Senior Lecturer and Coordinator of the program in Vehicle Design at the Lahti Institute of Design and Fine Arts. I did have to read that one.
Hello. Guess what? We're not an Institute of Fine Arts anymore.
Oh, right.
I need to update that.
You need to update your LinkedIn profile, mate.
Yeah, they closed that school last year, that part.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's sad news, but there you
go. The world has fewer painters as a result.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sad thing to lose some art in the world. It happened. Anyway.
Yes. Before we get too political, we do need about as much as we can get right at the moment.
Yeah.
So the way we thought we we're going to work this tonight is Andrew has come up with a few sort of topics and sort of pointers really to chat around. So what we're going to do is just do that, chat, see where the conversation takes us, but without that constraint of the 140 characters, which is good. Andrew, do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah.
You can design a little bit. You can discuss a little bit more around the background there. Okay.
Well, there's three areas we're going to discuss tonight, and I thought I'd keep these quite general as more of a sort of an introduction, a starter for people who don't really know that much about design. So it gives the opportunity for nearly Matteo to explain to us ignorant people like me. Us non-cultured people, exactly what goes on for designers and that sort of thing. So the first question we're going to start with is what are the typical constraints designers are put under? And if I could open that first of all, I think to Nia, please.
Well, if we're talking from my personal experience, my constraints are generally a little different from your ordinary car designer. Where would I start? Because my day job is designing armored vehicles. For those who don't know, who haven't listened to the Rear View podcast. Now the constraints for armored vehicles are obviously quite different from the constraints from your regular cars and from regular trucks and regular vehicles. You'd probably be surprised to realise that weight is our biggest driver. Armored vehicles are by definition very heavy. We're trying to save as much weight as we possibly can. So the constraints are basically written generally by the customer, the end user, rather than designing a vehicle and then hoping to try and sell it. They're generally designed to a very specific brief, according to a very specific customer. And those constraints can be exceedingly specific. They basically come in as a 2-inch thick book sometimes, which will define everything down to the size and shape of the cup holders. Even in a military vehicle, just defining the size and the shape of the cup holders. That it has to be able to hold a standard 330ml can of Coke and a half-litre bottle of Coke, and to fold in and out so it doesn't snag on whatever that they're wearing. But the things which are the kind of constraints which are the same for all designers really are the basic stuff. How many people is this vehicle designed for? What are they doing in the car? What is the role of the vehicle? Where is it going to be driving? What are people doing inside the vehicle? How much space do they need? There's a lot of regulations, an awful lot of regulations, and this again, the set of regulations that I'll be designing to will be different from the set of regulations that a designer at Aston Martin would be designing to. But we still need to comply with a lot of the civilian regulations as well. Your basic road traffic stuff, the crash testing and seating, and I should have silenced my phone. Crash testing and seating and lighting and mirrors and all this kind of stuff. You need to comply with all the road regulation, whether it's a military vehicle or not. Ergonomic requirements. In ordinary cars, in ordinary vehicles, each manufacturer really sets their own sets of standards for this kind of stuff. There's no hard, fast regulation about how much headroom you need in a car, beyond what you need to pass a crash test. For military vehicles, there's a whole ergonomics human factors handbook, which really defines absolutely everything from your knee space to the width, the shoulder space, to the size of the handle, and to the maximum strength that the handle can be so that the 5th percentile female can operate it. Lots and lots and lots of regulations, and those are also very constraining.
Because that's one thing that I didn't really appreciate until I was on Twitter and talking to like yourselves and people like that, but just with normal car production, is how much the legislation impacts on a design. Because, you know, again, being not educated in this, I'll sit there and go, why is that there? And then you mention this and they go, well, it's going to be because this strength is needed for this type of crash. You go, right, now it's beginning to make sense. It's not just on a whim, and that's the thing that I think perhaps sometimes members of the public don't appreciate, is that a lot of this stuff is dictated to, and it's how that is then interpreted and made into, you know, whoever's particular look. But it's not, oh, they've just decided they'll have massive A-pillars just for the sake of it because that frames the windscreen nicely or something like that. You know, it's not usually that. That's and it was interesting when I understood that, is to then see where a designer or a design team then does put their little flourishes and touches, and how limited that can be on a vehicle, really. Which I was a bit surprised at, because of, like I said, because of all the constraints of other things like pedestrian safety, crash test, you know, needing particular materials here, there, and you know, shut lines and things like that. So for military vehicle, what you're saying there is it's even more so because the interior space is dictated to so much stronger than it is in a, say, a civilian car.
Yeah, it's hard and fast rules rather than any particular manufacturer deciding what's good enough for them. I mean, one of the conversations that we were having on Twitter in the last week or so, I think it was you that started it, about the size of glass. You know, why do cars these days have much higher, lower glass lines for the side glass? And Lee started doing some really nice drawings showing the proportions of different vehicles over time and stuff. And one of the things that one of the notions that came out of that I hadn't even considered myself, of why the glass line is been rising in cars, is actually related to pedestrian protection, because the pedestrian protection is raising the bonnet lines of cars, and to retain any kind of aesthetic flow, any kind of proportion to the car, you kind of want the bottom line of your glass to relate to the line of the bonnet. So if the bonnet's rising up, but your glass is staying low, you have a step there that just doesn't look right. And so your glass rises up just to maintain that natural line that certainly a lot of designers will want from the bonnet. So you see how one set of regulations ostensibly is really should just be about the front of the car. It's just about how the bumper prevents somebody from a pedestrian from cracking their head on the windscreen. Ends up quite significantly affecting the proportions of the car and the entire aesthetic of the car. I mean Lee, I know you've got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I got quite excited about that with the talk of the window line. I was trying to prove a point about someone mentioned the Discovery too, but I was really just trying to talk about proportions where usually we want at least 50-50 or 40-60. We want more metal than glass. Otherwise, you're driving around in a greenhouse. So it's just a proportional thing that I was heading down that route. And as you say, you raise the bonnet, you raise everything up. Your starting point for glass is higher. But going back to this constraints thing, as a teacher of design, have to kind of go right back to the start for my students. It's a case of all designers have constraints, and obviously the first one is always cost of any product of any project of any, it's cost, time, money, time is money gives you time, it's all just cost. So that's the first one, and vehicles are no different in that. And there are other factors that are common across products. But the one thing that is unique about vehicles is, okay, a motorbike is ambiguous. We kind of sit on it, but we are inside them. So vehicles, we are inside. People are inside. So here's another constraint. The people have to fit inside. You can't have a car smaller than a person, right? That's impossible. Isagonis did an amazing job, and original Cinquecento, again, amazing job of that. Looks almost impossible, but they managed it. So why don't we have cars that small anymore? Well, Nia's already talked a lot about that. That the safety means we need more space around those people, more crash structure, things like that. So you can see how the constraints have always been there of cost, fitting people inside, manufacturing it in that's part of the cost. But these days we've added lots and lots more rules about that, and that's where vehicle design gets more constrained in some areas. But we could argue that designing a TV, is that designing a Samsung TV, is there more freedom there? Well, there's still electrical safety constraints, and you have to shield this from this, and so it's not easier. But cars, there are human lives at stake here, and governments of the world have brought in so many rules, varying across territories, and the combination of them all. If you want to sell a car globally, you could aim for a certain set of rules in one country, but if you want to sell it globally, you're looking at a mixture of so many different legislations that that's where it becomes. I mean, most designers have no clue what all of them are. No one can know all of them ever. It's impossible. So
it's weird seeing the detail changes. Sorry, as someone who notices these things, it's weird seeing the detail changes in cars from
totally
one
agree.
territory to another. Side marker lights are a key one, and both Matteo and I drive MX-5s, as we tell everyone all the time.
Yeah.
But you'll notice, the cars have. Did you know that? But you'll notice that ours have little blanking plates in those front. In the front and in the rear bumpers for the side markers that are needed in the US and stuff. And that's a pretty obvious solution.
One of my students is actually an MOT tester. That's his other job while he's studying car design. And I learned a lot from him in Finland. Again, he was telling me about it. Finnish legislation is different to German legislation, or you would expect all EU to be the same, but he was saying, no, it's unique to every country. We were talking about a certain Mercedes that, growing up in England, I think W124, I think I blogged about this, but it had a little side marker in the UK. And in Germany, it doesn't have that. It looks really clean, beautiful design in Germany. But in Finland, it has the side marker in common with the UK. But I thought, why wouldn't it have why wouldn't it be in common with Germany? But it's really random which countries legislate what. If you're lucky, manufacturers manage to get a car that's the same across the world, but it's very, very rare.
They can never be exactly the same across the world. It's not a question of one country is more severe than the other, whether it's crash testing or seat belts or anything like that. They're just different, and the headlights on American cars are symmetrical. They point straight down the road, and the headlights on pretty much anywhere else in the world are actually offset. They point curbside so that you don't blind oncoming traffic. It's literally impossible to design a car with one set of headlights that you can sell in America and in Europe.
Yeah, amazing fact. And we wonder why cars look complicated and look a little odd sometimes, because we're trying to comply with all these constraints. So, you know.
Yeah, and that's before you get to local tastes of design as well. Because we've seen that before when someone's tried to go global. Well, in the past, where people have tried to go global hasn't been successful. It just hasn't seemed to work because it's almost as though a car's been made by committee and they've picked the elements, an element from here and there and there and there, put it together, and then you just go, well, no one now wants that because it doesn't satisfy the need for anyone in particular, because it's just lost the message.
It's true.
We don't always start from a clear sheet of paper.
No.
For example, the typical cases I handle, usually the platform is given, so you have all the hard points of the platform. You have the A pillar that you can't move, it comes with the platform, you can't move the base, and in some cases, when it's a smaller styling, you aren't really free with the section of the body side if you can't move the hinges, the door hinges. So mostly on top of all the right things we have said, then more often than not, we have to start from another car, from an existing vehicle, for economic reason, industrial reason, the like. And so with that, or a whole set of more constraints come into play.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, of course, I hadn't appreciated that, but it makes total sense, because you could be using an existing platform, or the new platform that's going to be the existing platform for a while, that sort of thing. Yeah, that makes total sense.
The industry term there is hard points, so you always have to work around hard points. Some of those, the hard points are things that you can't move, as in they're called hard. Because I mean, I think the term comes from even when you're clay modeling, you go through and there's a hard bit, right? We put them in. It's like you can't go any further than this because it's rock hard. So they're called hard points, and they could come from using an existing chassis or existing car structure, but also, a person's head is a hard point. It's a little bit softer, but you can't go through their head to chop the roof lower. So, but basically, you're talking engineering hard points like the top of the engine, or strut mounts or things like that, and you can't go beyond those as a designer, and they're fixed.
Is there not a story about the heater module or something in the Austin Allegro is one of the reasons why the bonnet's so high, or something ridiculous? Is there not something like that? Some anecdote about that? It could be rubbish, of course.
Yeah, but the Allegro is does it have the gearbox under the engine like the Mini? Isn't that why E-Series engine is too tall? So the bonnet is really high.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but it is to do with the bonnet.
I met when I was a student Harris Mann, because Neil will know David Brown, but Harris Mann of Allegro fame came in for a day, and I think we asked him about that, but I honestly can't remember his answer. It was 25 years ago or something.
Was that one of the few days you turned up and didn't get your brother to do it for you?
Yeah, when I was so into that day, yeah, I can vaguely remember hungover what he said. But he was a lovely, lovely guy, and he was really kind of, if you mention the Allegro, that his eyes just faded, kind of
Well, you see the
You have
original
to-
sketches; they looked fantastic.
Yeah, he's an amazing artist. He helped us. He taught us a few techniques. He was just in for a couple of hours and he was helping us draw. Really, really amazing artist. But
The Allegro is actually a great example of a few things. I use the Allegro a lot when I'm explaining car design because, as you just mentioned, if you've ever seen the original Harris Mann drawings of what his vision of what the Allegro is supposed to be, it's lovely. It's lovely. The proportion right, really it's slow, it's sleek, and that's what it was supposed to be. And then all of the engineering constraints creeped in of whether it was the gearbox in the sump. I don't know about that, but certain engineering hard points, certain things that were carried over from other vehicles that altered the proportions. Just generally, I think need to be careful here. Allowing engineers to ruin something, because I use the Allegro as an example of how delicate the difference is between pretty and pig ugly. I'll show the Austin Allegro alongside the Alfa Sud, and the Alfa Sud is generally regarded as quite a pretty, delicate little thing, and the Allegro is pretty universally derided as being really quite ugly and ungainly. And then when you look at the two of them next to each other and ask somebody, even a professional designer, describe to me, explain to me what's the difference between these two designs? Why is one of them pretty and the other one isn't? Because the proportions in basic terms are pretty similar. The shape in basic terms is pretty similar. We often say that a good design, you can kind of define it with 2 or 3 strokes of the pen. You could, like any of the three of us could put 3 lines down on a piece of paper and anybody would know that it was a Porsche 911. And good design, you can generally do that. If you try doing that with a Allegro and an Alfa Sud, it's actually quite difficult to get the two of them to look different. And when you really do look at the details of why is one of them pretty and the other one isn't, it comes down to really quite subtle things about whether whether the A-pillar, where the A-pillar intersects the front axle and where the crease line intersects the wheel arches and things like that. It's quite subtle things in the proportions and subtle things in the surfacing that make all of the difference between a pretty car and an ugly car. And I think there's there's a lot to be learned from that.
Yeah, something I'd chip in. I've never been a fan of the Alfa Sud. I think it's ugly, but but I agree it's better than Allegro. But that's where I think I'm more holistic in that the brand creeps in. I mean, it's just got an Alfa badge, so therefore it's better. I mean, a lot of people, it's a very difficult thing because you'll never find a car designer that isn't a car enthusiast. So how can you remove that baggage? And I think you're right to compare those two. It's a good comparison because if you take away the badges, let's do a clinic on it, take away the badges and try to pretend you don't know what either of them are. It is very subtle, the differences. It's almost imperceptible. And, as soon as that badge appears and the Alfa shield, our emotions take over and we say the Alfa Sud looks better.
With the exception of the Alfa Arna, of course. Let's make sure we.
That's just terrible. So, but even that, surely the Alfa badge makes that better than the Nissan version. I would happily have the Alfa version because of the badge, right? I'm unashamedly convinced.
That's pretty desperate. I'm sorry.
But it has a lot of, it's like we don't want to get into new cars too much, but I recently ordered a new car and it's not a brand I'm a fan of, but if it's the right shape, I'll buy it. I like to be biased the other way, in that if it's a good design, it's a good design. But yeah, I think the Allegro is bad. Yeah, it's bad. But a lot of it is to do with proportions. But it's subtle, yeah.
So just from talking about the constraints then, is there typically one group of constraints? We've talked about finance, we've talked about legislation or safety reasons. We've talked about using existing hard points.
Yeah.
Is there one that will be more impactful than any other typically, or does it change in your experiences from each design?
It's each design. I mean, it depends on, as Nier would say,
Does it depend on the constraints?
Yeah, there's a lot more in that genre in terms of functionality. So it comes down to functionality, actually. The constraints, like we were discussing about seeing out of modern cars, seeing out of a Lamborghini is less of a concern than seeing out of a family MPV that a 60-year-old, 70-year-old lady might drive. So constraints like that will be stricter on a MPV or family car. I mean, the argument goes that the small family car is much more difficult to design than a Lamborghini. You know, I tell my students this because they're all, you know, we were the same when we were students. Just, I want to draw Ferraris like that. That's the easy one. That's super easy. That would just come out of you like, you know, wine out of an Italian cellar or something.
You scribble those in the margin of your notepad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you try designing a new Opel Corsa. That's difficult. Super difficult to make that desirable, functional, cheap. It's really hard. And then try designing an MPV. I know Andrew's not so keen on MPVs, so, you know, design a good-looking one. And a really good example of this, not to bring up too new a car, but, you know, the first Ford S-Max was a superb design. One of probably the best-looking MPV ever. But then compared to the current S-Max, and you'll see we're back into the Alphasud versus Allegro thing. The new S-Max is a little bit more Allegro. but the original S-Max was not designed by Ford, by the way. So there's a clue.
Oh, right.
Okay, so the overriding constraint is functionality, and then the others play depending on what the functionality is, or who the company is, what the brief is for designing and getting this car to the public, then will impact more depending on what it is.
Yeah, like meeting that legislation is functionality. I mean, a lot of that legislation, to be fair, has been brought in as a function. You know, it's restrictive, but the function of not killing people, the function of scooping them over the bonnet rather than under the, you know, that's a good function, isn't it? I mean,
it's something you need to do, therefore it's a requirement on whatever it is you're designing.
Or like we don't have tail fins like Cadillacs. You know, we don't have spikes at the front to kill people. These are good functions, but there's a lot of them, so we need to include a lot of them.
Because understanding that has made me realise it's a bit similar to architecture, that it's a very technical design discipline because of the amount of legislation. You don't just go, there's a car, I like these lines, there we go, off we go. You know, there is so much that has to be taken into it, and the partnership that you need to develop with engineering and the rest of it, and I know I've discussed it with all of you on Rear View, is the partnerships that need to happen from every design team, ideally with the rest of the company, to try and protect the concept as much as the vision, as much as possible, as much as it can be done.
It has that a lot in common with architecture. Again, from my point of view as a school, it's why you need a master's. It's why it's minimum 6 years study to become a car designer. Minimum. It's the same as architecture. That's a lot. Traditionally, we know that's a difficult task, and we have a lot, like becoming a doctor, becoming an architect is a long-term study. And it's crazy that some schools, you know, want to do a BA in 3 years of car design. No, it's because of the complexity of it. It needs to be 6 years that people do, you know. At least,
and you've got to go and do experience in that. You've got to go into an office and understand and experience. Just experience what being in an office is all about.
Exactly. Yeah. With all those factors. Yeah, it's all those factors. You can only experience that in a business. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I think another of the constraints that we haven't really talked about is manufacturing. If there's one thing that actually makes car design slightly different from architecture, is that a building isn't, generally speaking, isn't mass produced. You're not designing one and then you're wanting to run off 100,000 of them a year. And a lot of the things you say that the difference between designing a Ferrari or a Lamborghini versus designing an Opel Corsa is that with a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, there's a lot of, you can be forgiven for designing it in a way that's going to be hard to manufacture, or that's going to involve
absolutely right.
somebody one-off kind of involving craft in the manufacture, involving in the olden days when the panels were hand beaten, you could get away with much more surfacing if it was in low volume than you could when you were trying to stamp out 50,000 or 100,000 a year, which is how a Lamborghini Miura ends up looking so beautiful, because all those fins and all those parts are all hand put on one at a time, and each hand cut and each manufactured in this very labor intensive way. And you think you can't get away with that kind of stuff when you're turning out a mass produced vehicle.
Exactly. You know the thing I was very lucky to visit when I was a student. I visited Newport Pagnell when they were making the last ever the Vantage and the V8 ones with
the Virage and stuff.
Yeah, Virage. I mean, the guys there hand beat every panel, and no panel is the same. I mean, if you take a wing from a Virage and from a scrapyard, no such thing, but imagine this.
Quite
try
a
and fit
scrapyard.
it, you've dented your wing on your Virage, you go get another wing from a scrapyard. It's not going to fit, because every single wing is completely unique on every Virage, as Neil's saying. So like, even the guys that manufactured them are kind of designers, because they're creating the surfaces on each car. So at the very high end, it's easier, but yeah, the constraints are much tighter for a Corsa. I mean, I'm telling my students this all the time, that the tolerances on a Toyota Yaris are, tiny, like less than a millimeter, but on a high-end car, Ferraris, Astons, everything, it's in the double figures even of millimeters.
Well, just trying to pull that apart slightly, then, do you think with the advances in manufacturing technology, I mean, if only we had someone that was on cutting edge of this sort of thing in this call, but if do you think that allows for more bespoke looking design on more mainstream vehicles now? I mean, again, we're not trying to single out any current ones, but if you look at an Infiniti, they've got very sharp lines on their cars, which could we have done 10 years ago?
No.
In a manufacturing process, I'm not sure we could.
So
with the advances that are happening, does this open the options for designers now more and more, do you think?
It does a little bit, but as I noted recently, if you look at Audi, Volkswagen, currently they're putting really sharp creases in their cars. That is patented technology for VW Group.
Right.
So no one can put creases that sharp in their cars like Audi are doing now. So, I mean, that shows you how much... Is that
a design patent, or is that a manufacturing patent?
It's manufacturing.
So you can't put that crease on in the way they're doing it. You'd have to develop a new way to do that. Okay.
You'd have to figure out how they're doing it somehow. But yeah, VAG
just buy a factory and split it in half.
Well, that's what they do. Yeah. But yeah, so people like Infiniti are trying that, but it's the same way that when the first Lexus was made, they had patented technology of getting their panel gaps smaller than everyone else, and no one knew how they were doing it. And I remember when the reports were out from magazines, and the Lexus factory was completely sealed off. No one was allowed in this section where they aligned the panels, because it was top secret advantage that they had. For many years, no one could touch Lexus for the panel fit, for the panel gaps, but Audi are now matching that. But yeah, then at the moment, Volkswagen Group have this patented stamping technology that no one can do quite as sharp creases as them, which makes a huge difference to a designer, because we're all about putting creases all over the cars, aren't we? At the moment, Volkswagen are the best at stamping those for some reason. So,
Okay. Well, I think we'll move on to our second area then.
Yeah.
Now, and this was the one, Lee. We'll come to you after we asked Nir this one first. But this was the one that you picked me up on when I originally asked you this question, or put this question forward and said, this is the sort of thing we're going to talk about. But it is, how does the industry move on from a trend?
Yeah.
So, Nir, how do you think? Is it, because where I was coming from with that question was, is it that one person creates something or comes out with a look that everybody goes, yeah, I really like that. Let's all take elements of that and put that in our concepts from now on. And that's where it becomes a trend, or, how does a trend happen in the first place?
More often than not, from out of desperation. To move out of your comfort zone, you need a good reason to move out of your comfort zone. For as long as you are selling hundreds of thousands of cars a year, and you're building hundreds of thousands of cars a year and successfully selling hundreds of thousands of cars a year, it's very hard for even the best designer in the world to convince their management to take some kind of risk and to change something, to do something different. If you look at the Nissan Qashqai, which essentially created a whole new category of family car, they completely changed what your standard family car was, really in quite a short period of time. And that came out of desperation. That came out of Nissan realizing that they could no longer get away with just selling little hatchbacks and little saloons, because there were cheaper and or better alternatives. And that the only way that they were going to survive was to do something different, to do something new, to push the boundaries a little bit. And between the Duke and the Qashqai, they saved the company. Another company who was having more success selling their mainstream models wouldn't have bothered to take that risk.
No.
And so I really think that desperation, to a certain extent, is one of the great drivers to this. It's just needing to do something different, because the car industry is really very conservative. It's not going to do something different just for the sake of being different, and it's not going to take risks for as long as it's selling.
So okay. I mean, I suppose the ultimate recent-ish example is Bangle, the Bangle change with the BMW, and that seemed quite a monumental shift in the industry, because I mean, we know it that with buyers change is bad, because it's as Nir said, the industry is conservative with a small c, but so are the buyers. Buyers are very conservative and very safe often, although the Qashqai is a counterpoint, and the Duke are counterpoints to that, because down any street in Britain at the minute you'll see at least 2 or 3 of them. So they've hit the pulse, they've hit the button there. So how do you think the Bangle look happened? Because from the outside it didn't look like BMW were desperate or anything. No. Or was it to help move them on another level?
But this is kind of my problem with the question, in that there are no trends until you create a trend, if you like. So
who decides? So is it by being copied by other designers that it becomes a trend?
Yeah. So the trend is an accidental thing in the car.
So it is then okay. Sorry, because I'm sorry I keep interrupting, but I'm trying to understand this myself as
me too
as a layperson. But so then it is a form of flattery from your equals, from fellow designers.
It's simpler than that. If something sells, then people will jump on that bandwagon. It's a bit like copies of the Spice Girls, isn't it? It's in music industry, it's not because we think the Spice Girls are good. I like them actually, but it's not because of that. It's because of the money they make. So money talks, not that's a good trend. We want to flatter the designers. You know, I think what people saw is that Bangor was ahead of everybody. And okay, the initial reaction was bad, but in the end, actually, I think his 5 Series was the best-selling 5 Series ever still.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the numbers spoke for themselves, despite what you read from the noisy people are usually in the minority, and sales are everything. So trends happen just because a company sees money. It's not about flattery. And it's also not really on purpose. You know, I think.
Oh, I can't imagine someone wakes up one morning and goes, right, I must start a trend. You know, it's like someone saying, exactly. I must protect my legacy. No, it's not for you to decide. That's not for you who did the initial thing to decide. That will be because other people react to it.
And that's a word, and that's a design area that's coming from fashion. You know, fashion is a trend-based industry. And they don't invent them either, you know, because you can't tell people what to wear. It doesn't work. So, you know, the car industry are no different. They won't tell you what to buy. But Bangor was, you know, he was close to you know, he pushed ahead. But that's where, you know, every designer wants to do what Bangor does, trust me, but the management don't want them to. So, you know, that's why Bangor is the designer's hero, because, you know, we all sketch stuff like that. And
but it must, because the board must be scared. The board are scared that they can't sell something.
You know, so he backs you up.
As a designer, you were talking of constraints.
Yeah.
It's to convince the powers that be, the giant checkbook in the sky, that no, go with this vision, because it will make a difference. It will move us forward, and it's the balance, I presume, between not scaring them too much but still pushing things.
It's kind of, I think what Bangor did brilliantly was, I wasn't there, but I do suspect the way he did it, from what I've heard him talk about, you know, it's more a case of, this is what will happen if you don't do this. If you keep explaining, this is what will happen if you don't listen to me, that's a good way of convincing people to move forward.
Fear.
You know, imagine if BMW didn't do what Bangor did. Imagine if their cars had just carried on. I mean, they tried to erase things a bit. I mean, I had the one that went backwards a bit, the 5 Series, but, you know, they kind of tried to erase it, but they didn't completely. They kept a lot of the surfacing stuff he'd done. And the reason, if you listen to some of his talks, the reason he had to do that was actually the legislation, again, with the higher bonnets and the safety. He needed to disguise all of that bulk. So, you know, that would have been his argument, trust me, from the inside, would have been, if we don't do this, we're screwed. We just get fat, boring BMWs. So he would have put it to them like, you've just got to leap into this or you'll be doomed. And he was right. I mean, and look at them now without him.
and that happens across other products as well as cars.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to sell a company that traditionally sold white products, that actually a red product would be good and would help them stand out in the marketplace.
Crazy.
Which it seems to have worked. I see them everywhere. But yeah, something that I worked on, and that's it just takes the slightest little bit like that to actually trigger it and to make enough of it.
So trends will, you know, who knows what the next trend will be. I think at the moment BMW set that one. I think BMW set the current one again with the i brand, i3, i8 with the floating surfacing.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that a lot in Toyota and everybody copying that. But again, it's kind of like I say, it's more about the designers are doing all this all the time, and we don't see it. And it's only when it gets the green light from management that we see it.
I think sometimes all of it is technology driven, whether it's manufacturing technologies or actually the design technologies themselves. The i3 and i8, that aesthetic is born really of how they're making the cars and the mixed surfaces, different shapes, different textures, because they're using mixed materials. I've often thought that the kind of the flame surfacing, the Bangor flame surfacing, was really where designers had reached a certain level of maturity with tools like Alias. If you look at the history of car design, the tools that the designers are using affects the design. So in the 1960s, when designers were using airbrushes, the cars all looked soft, because when you're drawing something with an airbrush, it's going to look soft. And then the magic marker got invented, and that's a very sharp tool. And cars in the 1970s suddenly got very sharp, because a generation of designers who've been brought up with airbrushes were suddenly given these magic markers and didn't really know what to do with them, and other than these sharp lines, or just, you start drawing it with it, and you get this interesting new shape that you'd never seen before. It's like, oh, I like that. I'm going to work with that. What can I do with that? And then the techniques get developed, and we started adding scraping pastels. Lee and myself, we grew up with a generation that really grew up scraping pastels and swiping them over a marker pad, electroset marker pad with markers.
Presentation techniques by Dick Powell.
Presentation techniques, exactly. And then all of a sudden,
next door.
and then all of a sudden, Alias and the 3D CAD packages came out. I mean, the initial cars that were designed with those packages were based around what a designer who wasn't yet comfortable with this new tool was capable of doing. The early CAD packages in the early 90s were all really just about intersecting basic geometrical shapes. You take a block and then you intersect a sphere with it, and you decide whether you're leaving the intersection or getting rid of the intersection. And when you start doing something like that in the early days, you would get a Mark I Ford Focus. That's the natural shape that you would get when you weren't that comfortable with the tool, and when the tool itself wasn't that mature. And I think the flame surfacing of BMW in the late 90s was where Alias had reached this level of maturity where you could do more interesting things with it. You could create surfaces that were actually quite hard to draw with a marker and pastel.
Yeah.
And
you want to know what the next trend is then? Because my students are doing it now, of course. That's what the next trend is. So, I mean, one really interesting one is Renault moving ahead, because they've stopped using even Photoshop, I think. So they use, they paint on iPad for their sketches. If you look at the Renault range now, really blobby, kind of soft but modern. So because I was talking to a Renault designer who said, they started using different digital painting tools. So you change the tools and you change the style. And then they also, when they wanted to model it, the Alias modelers couldn't do it. They had to completely relearn how to model all the new Renaults. So the tools are really important. Nia's picked up on a perfect point there. So Renault have moved on to a different software now. So Renault, Kajar, the Clio, the Maquette, you see the soft but technical shapes. It's really interesting what Renault are doing. So
it's funny you saying that, because I was still at university, so doing product design, at the point where we moved. When we started off, they said, no, you don't need a computer. And we were all like markers and pastels and all these kind of things and doing all that. And then someone went to teach in Thailand for a summer and came back with a possibly not the most legitimate copy in the world of a CAD package. It was 3D Studio Max. And all of a sudden, it's not really a CAD package, but as good as we got at that.
I hate that program.
And so we came back, and all of a sudden, everything moved from like markers and stuff to that, and then matured into SolidWorks. So from a product design point of view, by the time we finished, it was completely the stuff that everyone was designing right the way through was completely different, because the tools had changed in the 4 years that I was doing product design. The tools all changed completely. We were right in the middle of that tipping point.
We were. I mean, I was too. But the tools are changing again. So the new tools that are coming in are virtual reality sketching, algorithmic design, so AI design. So we won't design cars so much. AI will design cars. But what the AI does, so one of my students did her thesis on this. So what AI can do for you is to mess up your ideas. So we'll see more than flame surfacing. So we'll see, algorithms kind of putting out weird patterns and weird shapes, and you'll figure something out. The human has to figure out what the AI is doing, if that makes sense. But you can already see it in some concepts like the Renault Tresor, I think it's that the big coupe thing has a lot of algorithmically designed patterning on the surface. So
that's
did they do that with the BMW as well? The 100 years.
Yeah.
The one that it's going to move. They were talking about that the surface moves depending on what it's doing.
So that one again, but that's within ALIS. So within the CAD, you can use little programs plugins to change the surface a bit. But that will move forward to completely generating the shapes of vehicles. So the future will be humans kind of guiding algorithms into randomly generating new designs. So the next trend will be.
What you're saying is we're all going to have transformer cars. Brilliant.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, they might look a lot more like that in future, which is crazy, but fun. And it will be completely weird to us old guys. We won't like it at all. But we won't be the people buying them, so it doesn't matter, does it? That's the other thing, when you hear, like, the Bangle effect was just to upset customers that were going to die soon anyway. So, does that really matter? No, they've got new customers now.
We need to get this lot out of the way.
Yeah, they were just the die-hard old.
One of the more controversial theories behind.
Anyone who hates Bangle is, probably moved on to something better now. Anyway.
No, but it is interesting to see because, slightly more educated members of the public, i.e. the motoring press, I have noticed them saying about actually the Bangle look is really good, and it's just taken a while for us all to understand that it was actually because we're so conservative and because we're peasants and proles, we don't get these things. You see, that's what it is.
But there are quite a lot of motoring journalists, Andrew, who do fit the description that's just been made. Though there are quite a few elderly gentlemen.
I like that. I mean, I didn't quite come up. I like that quote. A client at our school came up with that. It made me laugh so much. He came to us to get my students to rethink the caravan, right? The towing caravan. And he said that to me. He just said he's Finland's #1 caravan seller, importer. And he said to me, look, my customers are dying. And he didn't mean disappearing. He meant actually dying. So he said, how do I get new people to buy caravans? So I want you to do a project. And we did this it was called Project Groovy. It was good fun.
but it's funny you should say that, because earlier on I was flicking through Twitter, and I noticed that someone has bought a new caravan on Twitter, and the inside layout is completely different to anything else. He showed a picture of it, and I thought that looks really good. There's not a single furry cushion or anything in there, and it was like, oh, and then I thought, oh no, Alan, you're getting old.
Well, no. Funny you should say it, because I've stayed in an Airstream a couple of times, and
That's cool.
The packaging inside that is amazing. What can be fit in that area, in that space. Okay, it was a big one because it had to take 5 of us, even if 3 were small, but it still had to be big enough to take that. And the clever design work in something like that is amazing. I mean, we're now way off topic here, but
it's an interesting trend. It's again a trend in vehicles. So caravans are due a huge trend shift, because you know what the trend in caravans was? Yachts. So they're just designed to look like luxury yachts on the inside. But even luxury yachts don't look like that anymore, do they? They're not all wood and puffy pillows, are they?
Well, at the moment in the UK, sort of Middle England's buying these caravels and stuff like that. So they'll then move on. You know, the craze will move to caravans from there, I would imagine.
Maybe, yeah.
And then that may kickstart some shake-up, so it doesn't look like a white box.
But this project is the point about trends that our client just said. He's dying to convince the caravan manufacturers to go for this. You know, they don't want to. The guy that runs the company that he was dealing with is 80 years old and just says,
talk about the ultimate conservative market. when it comes to change.
But even the guy selling them wants new, he wants new product to sell. He wishes there's the bangle of the caravan industry, but there isn't. So, it gave our students a nice project to work on. But that's the point of a designer's job, is to kick the ass of those companies, right? This is what you should be doing. So,
yeah.
At the risk of pressing Andrew's buttons, the one thing that could really affect kind of the future of caravaning is autonomy, because if you're going to be able to be driven around by your own car, there are certain advantages to your car being more like a bedroom, something that you could have you take a long journey, you can go to sleep instead of. Right now, somebody who lives in New York and has a meeting in Chicago goes to bed, gets up at about 2-3 o'clock in the morning to get a taxi to LaGuardia, gets on a plane to Chicago, lands at 8 o'clock in the morning, goes to his meetings, has a day of meetings, having really not slept properly. Later in the evening, has dinner or goes back to the airport, flies back to New York, and he might be back in bed by 5 o'clock the following morning. With autonomous cars, you could actually have a hotel room that comes and picks you up. So instead of getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get a taxi to an airport, you would climb into bed at 10 o'clock at night, and this autonomous hotel room would just take the leisurely drive to Chicago. You arrive there having a good night's sleep. It could dock at a local hotel to let you use the facilities if you want to shower or have breakfast or anything like that. And then the same when you head home. And it could actually be much more efficient than plane travel. It could be much more comfortable than plane travel. The idea that there's a lot of talk now about how autonomy is going to change a car. There was somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody on Twitter, again, just last week, said that so many people think that it's just a car without a steering wheel, and don't realize that autonomy is a bigger step. It's not just taking away the steering wheel, it's taking away the horse. And it's going to completely change what the car is.
When it comes to an autonomous vehicle, we're going to have...
An autonomous car. Sorry, the question of what people are going to want to do in an autonomous car, I think there's been too much of this idea that people are going to want to work in an autonomous car or watch television in an autonomous car. I think that the main thing that people are going to want to do in an autonomous car is sleep.
Well, the problem is that you've got the people who are pushing autonomous vehicles want people to watch something because then they can sell advertising to them. That is, they're trying desperately to make money back on this. But definitely, I mean, an autonomous vehicle is going to be a box that carries you around. So what you do on the inside suddenly is open season. It could be, as you say, I mean, if it was me, I was in there on my own, I've got the opportunity to sleep. I'm going to sleep. Thank you very much. I have 3 small children. I need my sleep. But equally, if it's during the daytime and you are traveling somewhere, it makes a lot of sense to people to be able to work in that time. At the moment, it's very selfish of companies and silly of them to ask someone to work if they're driving, i.e. take phone calls, stop and have a meeting, something like that. Don't ask them to do that. But if they're not driving, take away what is a massively difficult task out of their hands, then yes, certainly if it's the working day, I get twitchy if then people start expecting that outside the working day, as it were. But I think that's a society issue more than anything else. But you don't have
to travel to work if that's the case. You can work whilst you travel.
Well, no, exactly. Because I mean,
whilst you work even.
How many times have I told you I'd love to get like a day van and just because I work from home and go, right, today the weather's nice, I'll go and park up on top of the hills, I'll just open the door and I'll work from inside the day van, and it's that sort of attitude that will open up, because everyone's going to be connected in some form, maybe hopefully not cars, but anyway, but connected in some form, because we've all got a phone, we're all going to have very good internet connection, we're all going to, our phones and tablets are becoming more powerful, so that we don't need to lug a laptop or a computer with us. So, we can do so much more with so much less, that we can work anywhere. then it's getting that mind shift as well. And I think that's what it's the opportunities autonomous vehicles will give us, which I think is the exciting bit, apart from the potential for being safer, etc., when everybody's in one and all that sort of stuff.
But that's a trend that if we go back to the trend thing, I mean, think about what that means to car companies. What do they do? I mean, they're traditionally geared up for selling these individual emotional attachment things that you love. You guys with the MX-5s, you know how that goes, how much you love it. But if you think about a manufacturer of that type of object, and you're talking about office space, you're talking about a hotel space. I mean, they're basically becoming property developers or something like this now.
Well, that's why they are desperately going into connectivity to produce, to be the one-stop shop for all your needs to do with travel. I mean, I know that's a big thing that Ford are trying to do. That they want to be the app that you go to and say, right, you know, and at the minute, our needs are, where can we park? Where can we go? Can you book a restaurant for us? Maybe can I pick up a car up when I get this other point and drop this car up because I'm going to need a different car? So, you know, a sort of car subscription model, that sort of thing. That's our needs at the moment. But it's, you know, once we get to that level and we're comfortable with this not going out and buying an MX-5 because it's an emotional attachment, because you know, for our everyday typical thing, that becomes a niche enjoyment.
I think that's
like a classic car is now, is a niche enjoyment.
But I mean, Ford are a good example where, I mean, if you're not Ferrari, if you're not even Alfa Romeo, why do you need to exist? Like Ford as a brand may need to just give up, you know?
The interesting thing,
cease to exist. So you have the Trump hotel chain of car, you have the Marriott hotel chain of car. They're all made by Ford. There's no Ford badges anywhere. There's no clue. Maybe if you take the wheel off on the back of the wheel, you might see made by Ford, for Hilton. You see what I mean? Like, give up their brand entirely.
The thing about you mentioning Ford, and the Fords are the best example I think you could have chosen there, is that they're a company that's actually recognised that's a challenge out there.
Yeah.
And are actually trying to do something about it, despite the Wall Street's best efforts.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, well, do people recognize Marks and Spencer's underwear? No, but they buy it and use it. Or another example would be, like if you take the wheels off some cars and look on the back of them, they're made by people like BBS or famous wheel companies, you know, but we don't see that, do we? We just see, like the Volkswagen Beetle I had on the back of the wheels, it's made by BBS, but on the front it says Volkswagen, right? So I think companies like Ford,
it's a white label.
They might have to demote themselves down to that level where they're kind of an invisible brand to the consumer, but they're still important to the industry. You know, that could be something they might have to head down that route, and they really don't want to do that, it seems, but they might have to do that. I'm just trying to think of what impact it might have on them, and that they need to survive as a manufacturer, because that's what the expertise they have is manufacturing. So we'll see, but you know, the people staying in a pod hotel, like a hotel you can rent to travel across America for a meeting. I mean, do you want that to be Ford? Is that a brand you trust as a hotel? No, you trust.
I only care as long as it says Holiday Inn on it, and I can get points.
Exactly.
That's basically what it boils down to. Can I get
Holiday Inn
points?
for that? So it's about experiences in future. In that, if you want a hotel experience, you would trust a brand with experience in the hotel area, however you say that. And if you want an experience in driving, because we will still be hopefully driving cars, you'll trust a brand like Porsche or Ferrari or Lotus that are good at driving, or even Alfa.
Matteo, was there something you were going to chip in with? Welcome back, by the way.
Yeah, you're back. Hey.
Chip in because the transformation of manufacturer, transformation of the work, and we spoke about Ford. We spoke. Basically, the feeling I have is that in reality, the car makers don't see the future very, very, very clear, or as clearly as they want us to believe. In this phase, they are as lost as everybody else, and they are throwing money around just to make sure that whatever is there, they have it. And whatever direction the future takes, they'll be there. They are bracing for impact. It's not like, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of scrambling. You could see that with the ride sharing, the way that one company invested and then suddenly another, and then everyone suddenly, sorry, you opened a ride sharing company, right? Have some money. You have some money. You have some money, and it does come across that everyone's saying, "Oh, hang on, if this is a thing and we're not in it, we're dead in the water."
Absolutely right. I read actually Car Magazine really short interview with the Citroën PSA CEO. I think said exactly that, and he openly just said, "We are betting on all the horses. You know, we are just getting ready for everything because we have to, because it will vary across." And he was really right about the power in, say, Europe is now with mayors, like the mayor of London, the mayor of Paris.
It's all cities. It's city state. We've gone back to city states.
Yeah,
because those mayors got together, didn't they? And they said, we are banning these type of cars from this point. That's it. Go.
Exactly. So
and
there's
the
fragmentation. So again, we were talking about constraints at the start. So now the constraints are going to be per city, not just per country, for design. And it's even more.
So do you think it's a complete fantasy then to ever think that there will be one set of constraints in say the next 10-15 years, one set of legislation rules?
Well,
do you think that's possible?
It could be, but look at what's happened with Trump.
I don't see
it's impossible. I mean, think about Trump and the Paris Agreement, and then all the states of America are wanting to join it, and they can't even agree on that. So.
Yeah, it's not Gene Roddenberry's image of this world yet, is it?
Is Mate still there?
Here
Sorry,
I am.
I thought you left.
No, I left earlier because of technical difficulties.
Don't worry, Andrew and I can sympathise with that this week. We're moving up. I think we're moved a little bit past the hour mark there. Okay. So, do we want to move? Is there anything else anybody has any thoughts? Anybody else have about industry and trends?
No.
No, not for this time.
Not until we come off the call and then we form a company and consultancy company and offer our wonderful advice to the world.
Yeah, too many trends.
So, Andrew,
just generally, I think I can see a trend back to what used to be niche vehicles. I think what had been considered to be niche vehicles is going to grow. Because of ride sharing, autonomy, whatever's going to win out. I think a lot of our day-to-day journeys are going to be taken up by services of some description, and it's going to free people up to buy the car that they actually want. You know, right now, the reason that the SUV or the crossover is king is because it can do everything. It's a very flexible design. It can take you to work, and it can take the kids to school, and it can go to IKEA, and it can do long journeys, and it can do short journeys. And if you're only buying one car and it needs to do everything, then that's what you need. If you're going to have some kind of autonomous ride-sharing service that's taking your kids to school, and if when you go to IKEA, you can tap your watch and it'll send a little smart card to take you to IKEA, and when you step out of IKEA, it'll already know what you've bought, and it will have sent a truck or a van of exactly the right size to take it home. Then the car that you can buy for yourself is now going to be an MX-5, and not just for people who have that lifestyle that allows them to do so. Yeah. I think we're going to see something else. I think we were basically discussing on Twitter just earlier today. Is that that little sports car is something that really everybody wants, but not many people can actually allow themselves to have. Not necessarily because of the money, but because of the lifestyle. Because they need their car to do other things. And generally speaking, the people who can afford it can't justify having that little sports car. And it's not going to be a little sports car for everybody. But for somebody, it'll be a little sports car. And for somebody else, it'll be a buggy. And for somebody else, it'll be a Jeep or an off-roader that's genuinely going to go off-road, not a great big Discovery or something for hauling stuff around.
Yeah.
And there'll be new niches as the car gradually becomes like the horses and becomes a more of a leisure activity. And the day-to-day stuff is taken over by services of various descriptions. But even those services, there's not going to be one catch-all. It's not going to be one autonomous London taxi. If the services are all working together, then when it's just you on your own, the car that'll show up will be a little car that's suitable just for you on your own. The car that'll show up to take you on a long journey will be different to the one that shows up to pick up a family from the airport and that kind of stuff. So there'll be a lot of variety amongst these various cars as a service as well. And I can absolutely see companies like Ford becoming a manufacturing hub rather than a brand that is selling cars to individuals. Yeah. There's a huge amount of advantages, certainly for a company of that kind of scale, to be purely doing fleet sales, to be, why should they be chasing individual customers when they can sell a fleet of hotel rooms to the Hilton, or sell a fleet of taxis to Lyft or Uber or whoever that might be, and sell 200,000 vehicles in one shop, because the number of vehicles that are going to be needed is not going to reduce significantly. The man miles, the global man miles, there's no reason why that should change. If I currently do 25,000 kilometers a year in my own car, even if I don't have a car and I'm entirely relying on services, I'm still going to be doing 25,000 kilometers a year. It's going to be spread over the various cars that are going to be doing that. So instead of my car doing 25,000 kilometers a year for 3 or 4 years and then going on to the second-hand market and you're having a 10-year life cycle, it's going to be run into the ground within 2 or 3 years, because it's not going to be parked up for 22 hours a day. It's going to be driven 24 hours a day. And within 2 years, it's going to be dead. So the car manufacturers will still be selling new cars on that 3-year cycle that they're currently selling them on. What there's not going to be is a second-hand market, because the cars are going to be running into the ground within 2 or 3 years. So the manufacturing base is still going to need to be there.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and that's where the people like Ford should be positive about it. They can provide all the spares. They can train mechanics. They have that. They know how to do that.
I think it's a case of educating the shareholders more than anything.
Yeah,
because the shareholders, with all these companies, the shareholders are looking for more sales, more every year, instead of them understanding, because no one wants to come out and say what the plan is, because it will be out in the open, but go, no, hang on guys, what you need to understand is, here, in 15, 20 years, there'll be this shift. You'll see this shift where suddenly we're not bothered about our badge being on every drive. We're bothered about the fact that we are supplying and we are manufacturing. Yeah. I mean, take, for example, GE, which is this massive global company, which people have heard only because it's so big. But hardly anybody knows how many things they are involved in your house, in the shops. And they are white labeling their manufacturing for other people. But they don't care, because one of the top 10 richest companies in the world because of that, and I think there's
what's
on the money there. We said it, and I've thought about it. Is that manufacturers got to have this mind shift into it, unless you are a niche manufacturer doing a specialist product.
Yeah, what's wrong with being Bosch or GE? That's a great business to be in, and Ford could do similar. And the niche thing, absolutely right. I mean, we already see that with people like Jaguar launching the E-Type, and Singer Porsches. That's going to be the future trend. I mean, you'll see more and more that Ford might just make these generic parts, like these generic serviced cars that they sell to hotel chains or something. But they also, I think, will maintain a brand like Mustang. And they will maintain that, and they will build heritage Mustangs.
Well, I can see the heritage thing becoming bigger and bigger. I mean, when I was, it sort of came to me as I was reading through the classic works for Jaguar Land Rover for this week's news show, that just thought that is a brilliant thing. If we get to the point where we've got people have got the disposable income on that because they have got a subscription, as Near outlined, along those lines or something similar, and we've got this disposable income. God, yeah, what would we give to, Alan and I have been lucky enough to drive an E-Type because we've been to Great Escapes, but to have that as my thing for the weekend, or a nice night like tonight, just go out for a drive and remembering what a drive is.
You do that in the US, stuff like Gotham City Cars and stuff. One of my cousins has that. He lives in New York. He has a subscription to that kind of service.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's the trend. It is right. Yeah. Niche trend is the trend.
Right. We can't release this now. We have to go out and be consultants.
This is valuable stuff.
Yeah. Ford, we've solved your problem. Your new we'll just knock on the new CEO's door.
Couch on my couch on my sofa. Solved it. Easy. No,
okay, well, I think we better, because Alan's getting impatient. We better move on to the last.
I'm aware of how late it is for people.
I know it is very late for everyone else, but you and me. I know that.
Also, the fact that I think that all five of us could actually talk until tomorrow morning if we're not careful.
Yeah. Yes. And it's not going to get dark here either.
No.
It's nearly midnight. No, that's nearly midnight.
Yeah. I was in Oslo at this time last year. I woke up in the middle of the night, thought I'd slept in because there was so much light outside, and it was actually only 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it doesn't get dark.
Nice.
Midnight sun.
Okay, then. And I think we'll start with Matteo on this one. Now, hopefully you've done your homework, everybody, and you name one car and why you think that's good design. It doesn't have to be your favorite design, but why you think it is good design.
Wow.
You are allowed to mention. No, I can't even say it. I'm not saying it.
So, do you want to start that one off, Matteo?
Oh, okay. Well, if I don't want to go too much back in time, and so I say the first generation Audi TT.
What? Right.
Thumbs up.
First generation Audi TT, because there are several aspects to it. Mm-hmm. It was one of those watershed moments in car design, because before the TT, the tendency to treat the surface that way was already emerging, but the TT was really the moment in which car design really changed. Even before all the Bango stuff, because the TT played with intersection of simple volumes between each other. The TT, one of the first times I treated shut lines as a design element instead of an engineering imposed cut line on the nice surface you have designed. And on the third, I'd say a good design has to ideally stay relevant and keep its aesthetic value over time. And the TT is really, really aging gracefully, and it is a true design classic. It still looks as new as, or even newer than the one that is in the showroom right now. So when you have really, really good design, it doesn't really age.
Okay. Now I do look at the Mark 1 TT now, and I'm thinking, that's quite nice. But as Neil was saying before, constraints mean that's never going to happen for me. But I think it is a strong design, and I think it definitely did a lot for the Audi brand. when that came out. That I think that was. I'm not going to say game changer. I'm not saying that, but it was a massive shift in the public's perception of Audi. I think it helped that.
Yeah,
and it was momentous because I remember it's probably the last time I've ever heard product designers inspiring themselves to get inspired by a vehicle. Now it's the other way around. Now the car industry follows product design trends most of the time because we are all hypnotized by iPhones, iPads, and that's the technology, and everyone wants to make an where it gets inspired by that, gets inspired by the latest smartphone designs, etc. While I remember at the time, people in the product design world saying like we should do something a bit like the Audi TT, you know.
And that was. I don't know if you saw my initial reaction there, but that was my problem. Was that again? I was still at university at the time. I was doing product design. It drove me mad that all of a sudden everywhere, every mood board had an Audi TT on it. Everything was Audi TT. Oh, it's like Bauhaus. It's social. It's industrial. And there was always like some
circular air vents,
jerk in a suit. It was the thing that was on everyone's mood board. And I'm sorry. And
yeah,
I got
next to an iPod.
Sickened. Yeah, exactly. Because of course, first year, second year university, the very first iPods came out. You see, you can work at my age really easily now. And there was a sodding iPod and a sodding Audi TT, and they were always beside each other on this white and this grey mood board. For no matter what it was, people would be designing like diabetes testers for kids. And they'd have a flaming Audi TT and a blooming iPod on there. So, and the trouble is that now I see a Mark 1 Audi TT, and I think, God, that's a really good-looking car. I've been really unfair to it for the last 15, 20 years. But 15. And so sorry. That's my reaction to the Audi TT. I think you're right, especially when you consider it was a Golf underneath. So the constraint conversation earlier on about the hard points and stuff.
Yeah.
To take those hard points and then, which I hadn't thought about before, turn the shut lines and stuff into those architectural features. The more I think about it, now you've said that, Matteo, the more impressive it is.
It's very impressive.
It was really brilliant because
it's brilliant,
if you analyze the TT, and that's the strength of his design. Every shut line, every separation between its pieces is there and done for a reason. It's not just, okay, we cut it here because we have to cut it here. No, everything matches. Everything, every line goes and connects this, and that. That's the first vehicle, probably that the first production car that did that, and in this way, and in this way, it really changed car design, and still looks great.
Yeah. I was studying when that launched, and we were inspired by that a lot. Nia was studying the same time too when that launched. I have a more positive product design version of that. Because one of my friends who is a car designer now, but he was originally on the product design at Coventry, and I think he switched because of the Audi TT, because he literally thought, if they could do that in car design, I want to switch to that, and he switched to our course, and he also then got an internship at Volkswagen and went to Germany. He worked at Volkswagen for many years. So that car literally inspired him to stop being a product design student and become a vehicle design student. And he succeeded in vehicle design. And I think that's great. But it's one of the most perfect, think about the way it went from concept to production as well, almost unchanged. I mean, that never happens. And yeah, think about the hard points, like you say, it's the same hard points as a Golf, as a Skoda Octavia, as a Volkswagen Beetle, the new Beetle.
Yeah, if you took that to a member of the public and said, that's a Golf underneath, they'd be going rubbish. No chance.
It's how did they do that? It's amazing. And yeah, I mean, my brother had the TT like that, a Mark 1. I've owned the new Beetle, and I've driven both, and to think that they're the same car is the same hard points.
Are you saying that the spoiler on the back went up and down on your brothers?
Yeah, well, it worked for the Audi, but it's so compact and sporty. But then the Beetle was really, lots of glass, and it's totally different feel from the same structure. It's amazing, isn't it? I think as well. Yeah, that's in my top 3 best ever car designs in history is TT, the first one. Absolutely agree. Yeah.
So Lee, given you're up at the minute and you've hinted you've got 2 others, so go on then. What's?
Oh yeah, 2 others.
What's your choice? What's your one?
So this question came to me a long time ago when I started writing my own blog about 10 years ago, because my wife asked me this, and it was one of the first things I wrote on my blog. So on my blog, there's a list of there's about 10 or 12. But so she challenged me to choose one car, and it was tough. I mean, for me though, and when I was studying as well, this was my inspiration. Just before I went to Coventry, this came out, and this is why I wanted to go there. I mean, you can talk about things like Fit Coupe and stuff, but as a teacher now and on my blog, if you want to define what the balance of everything we've been talking about today, about constraints and engineering and costs, and I have the McLaren F1 as my #1 best vehicle design of all time. Some people think it's ugly. It's not necessarily a beautiful car, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, because TT, the first one, is not necessarily beautiful either. But the McLaren F1 is the best car ever designed, and it's probably because it had the biggest budget. It had unlimited budget. It's also the best because 2 people did it, right? So there's no committee. There's no they did 1 or 2 clinics with rich clients, but there was no user research. But what it was superb ergonomics. The packaging on a McLaren F1 is some of the best you'll find, other than a Twingo or a Renault Scenic or something. It's so British to start from the inside outwards.
Mm-hmm. Is that one of his greatest strengths, do you think, his packaging?
Yeah, it's Isagonis level of genius in McLaren F1. So it's the Alec Isagonis tradition of British. We start from the inside and we make it as small as possible within the parameters of what we're trying to do. And it grows a little bit because we need a V12. You've got to have a V12. So, but 3 people, stroke of genius, golf clubs in the side, fit in the side, and then you've got all the goals of the weight saving, the first carbon fiber tub production car, all of this. It's everything about it is the perfect balance of engineering and design, and it's something like Pagani do now. McLaren have moved into areas of styling recently, but McLaren F1, the shape is about positive center of pressure of the aerodynamics. It's got the cut-off tail, which Gordon Murray always insists on, I've heard, whenever you work with him, because, that's the perfect aerodynamics. It may not look great. The rear is just very severe, that cut-off. But aerodynamically, that's what you should have. But it still looks nice. And the whole balance of functionality, engineering, stability, speed, everything comes together. So that's always my perfect example of art of car design. So.
Any car with a hand turned Babinga wood gear knob always wins for me.
There you go. See, even the gear. I mean, someone recently on my Instagram, I think it's a guy who owns a couple of them, but he Instagrams a picture of the footwell. I mean, if you can get your hand down there and take a picture of the footwell, the pedal box, and it's just beautiful. I mean, and this was designed in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like I say, Pagani are continuing that tradition of balance, of engineering and art and style. But McLaren really nailed it with that one.
If anyone can get their hands on a copy of the book by Doug Nye, Driving Ambition,
yeah,
I see that there. What is it on Abe Books at the minute? It's selling for £243.79. I know I didn't pay that for my copy.
That's not bad.
It's not bad. It's a lovely coffee table book.
Oh,
Get
my
it.
My housemate at Coventry had one. I bet he still got it. He bought it.
I've got it. Yeah.
Damn it, I don't have it. Because we always read his copy. You see, I thought I'm not going to buy it because he's got one.
And mine is definitely not available for lending out, by the way.
Exactly. Why did I think I would live with him forever? I did almost. I lived with him in London until I moved here. But there you go. Funny.
Oh, awesome choice. Really awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. I took a while to think that through, and I put it on my blog. It's been there for about 10 years now on my blog. That's the number one choice. So.
Even got Citroen CX wing mirrors. Proper supercar.
That's a shame, but it was never supposed to have those.
No, it was supposed to have the high up ones of the prototype.
With the indicators in the mirrors, which everybody does now. That was the first to do it. So there you go. Awesome. Perfect design.
Nia, now that the other
Hopefully
two have stolen.
Yeah. Surely those are
stolen two absolute classics.
I wasn't concerned that either of them was going to pick what I picked.
That's good.
I'm going to be a little bit more controversial, I think. First of all, we're not talking here about beauty, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that I picked this car. Simply to emphasize the fact that great design is not about beauty. It's not about being pretty. If you're asking, what's the prettiest car, then I'd go for the obvious choices of Ferrari Dino and Lamborghini Miura and things like that. Alpha 156. But that wasn't the question. No. And I mean, Lee also said one of the reasons that he picked the F1 was actually because of packaging. And certainly we have bring this conversation right back to the start about constraints. And it starts with the package. It starts with how many people are in the vehicle and what is each of them supposed to do while they're in the vehicle and how do they get in and out of the vehicle, and then you draw the vehicle around that package. So on that basis, I nearly went for the obvious one, which is also one that Lee's mentioned a couple of times already, which is the Mini, the original Issigonis Mini, which was a wonderful genius of packaging, but that was a little too obvious. So I've gone for anybody going to guess? It's the
Fiat Multipla is what I think.
It's the Fiat Multipla, yes.
that was just so leading up to the Fiat Multipla. It was either going to be that or it was going to be the Citroen Zara Picasso, the Mark 1. I figured it was probably the Multipla.
Okay, so it is the Multipla. And it's the Multipla for a few reasons, but largely because of the brilliant package and I'm going to say beautiful, the beautiful unconventionality of it, of throwing out the rule book and saying, okay, how do I carry a reasonable number of people around? At the time, the only people carriers really, it started with the Renault Espace, and it was the whole idea of the Renault Espace was a 7-seater. You carry 7 people around, but it was either 7 people or luggage. And if you wanted to carry people and luggage, then it was just 5 people because 2 of them were sitting in the boot. And that's basically the way that every MPV had been until the Multipla came along. And the Multipla had a whole different way of doing it. The Multipla, for those who don't realize this, is a 3+3 seating arrangement. There are 3 people in the front row and then 3 people in the second row. And then it still has a boot, and it always has the boot, whether you're on your own or you've got 2 people, you've got 5 people or 6 people. And that extra child, that 2+4 family, up until then, they needed a bus. There was no other way of carrying that number of people around. So the package is brilliant. That 3+3 2 rows package, shifting the gear lever up onto the dashboard, which was kind of bringing back an old idea. But But I also love the honesty of it. I love the honesty of the look of it, the way that, okay, so we've got this package, which is fundamentally uncomfortable. You can't hide the fact that the proportions, this is not going to be a pretty car. So let's not try. Let's not try and make it look low and sporty. Let's not try.
Are they almost glorifying?
Exactly, that's the thing. It's so, there's such honesty with it, and just running with that design. I remember once hearing it described as it looks like a punter dropped out of the sky and landed on a Mondeo, and that's kind of it, because the fact that the external package is really quite small. It's basically a C-size, a C category car. It's not a D category car. It's not a Mondeo sized car. It's a Focus sized car. It was essentially, I can't remember which came out first, whether it did predate it certainly predated the Picasso. I think it predated the Scenic as well.
Yeah.
And they came out, they've been developed in parallel, and they came out with fairly conventional 5+2 or 5 plus maybe 2 MPVs that weren't really MPVs. They couldn't really carry more people. Certainly not if they were also carrying luggage around with them. So I love the honesty of it. I love the large windows, the practicality of it. You're sitting high up and you have great visibility. It's the perfect, at the risk of sounding sexist, it's the perfect mum's car of being able to carry the whole family, and a lot of urban driving. It's not designed for long journeys. It's designed for a lot of urban driving. It's designed for the school run. It's designed for parking around town. And what's upsetting is how much they managed to spoil it with the facelift.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because they
got scared.
Exactly, they got scared. Basically, the uncomfortable look of the car and the way that they'd ran with, let's not try and make it pretty. Let's run with the ugly and give it character. And that's the other thing. The car has character. It's a car that becomes part of the family. They realised that this was a car for families, and it needed to be part of the family. It needed to be something that was almost toy-like. And at some point, they got cold feet and facelifted and tried to kind of make it look conventional with a facelift. And
was that because of what Honda brought out? Honda did one that was 3 and 3.
The HR, was it the HRV?
FRV.
Yes, the
Thank you.
the CRV, HRV was it HRV, was it?
No, the HRV was a nice one. Was the FRV?
FRV.
They copied the package. Honda copied the package.
They just tried. They made it a more conventional look.
They made it more conventional, which lost a lot of its character.
The center seating of the Honda wasn't a real standard size seat as it was on the Multipla, so it wasn't nearly as good. It was a bad copy. Yeah, bad copy. And you know why in the end they ruined the Multipla? Yes, they got cold feet, but it really happened because of the situation of the company at the time, because people don't realize, people that weren't in touring at the time, or don't realize in 2002, 2003, just how close Fiat was to bankruptcy. It was really, really a close call. So they made this facelift with zero money. It was like there was no budget. They did it in a hurry. They did it in a company situation that wasn't stable, and they did it because they needed the Multipla to sell, and so they made it. They tried to make it look like a car. Yeah, in the end, it didn't work anyway. But yeah, that was precisely the point. Okay, let's make it look like a car, so Zafira Man will buy it, maybe.
And that's the point, but they didn't. It sold much better when it was ugly. It sold much better when it was unconventional and uncomfortable and ugly and wasn't trying to look normal. There's a really strong message there about how people want character in cars. People want it's the reason that nobody could possibly describe the Duke as being pretty either. But it has character.
I was going to ask that actually because of I think the Duke is the biggest example of that now. And I think it's the biggest example of something quite unconventional selling really well for a long time. Do you think because of the Duke, if they brought that out, the multiplier out now in that sort of guise, sort of glorifying the fact that it isn't pretty and it is more function following form, that it would sell well?
I think that maybe it would. I think that something like that would probably sell better now. I think with all both the Duke and the Qashqai, the Duke, the Qashqai doesn't look that unconventional. The Qashqai is a much more
It
conservative.
copies the Vehicross. It does. I can park my Vehicross beside a Qashqai, and I can go, look, the same details.
It's
Honestly.
a fair point. It's a fair point.
Especially the first version of the Plus 2, which has
because again, a company designed it and didn't have the balls to really go for it. They did put it into production, but in a limited way, didn't they? So Nissan thought, it's really,
yeah. Well, it's the same design team.
Yeah, exactly. They took the people and the idea and really went for it with it, which is usually how it happens, right? It's look at the maybe this is stuff I shouldn't talk about now. Actually, I should stop myself. I was about to say,
well,
people that I know
I
are
help
at
you
different
out.
companies. So anyway,
I help you out because we were starting to mention a moment ago the Multipla and the Duke in the same sentence, which I think is unfair to the Multipla.
Yes.
Because while the Multipla is brilliant for its function, and so that's why its design is very good. The Duke is the complete opposite of the Multipla. Is pure extravagance at the expense of the usability of the vehicle, because of its design, it's very, very, very small inside.
I've been forced to sit in the back of a Duke on a number of occasions. I agree completely.
Yeah.
Do you think then it's been successful because of people's aspirations? They wanted this particular look. They wanted the aspiration of this chunky off-roader type look thing without
way off
having.
Now.
No. I know, but we'll come back to it. But I'm just trying to work out why was the Duke successful where the Multipla wasn't? Then
I think Duke fundamentally looks good to some people. I think we are just a particular type of person that are judging it in a particular way, and I think the people buying it think it looks fantastic.
And I think I agree with you. I think it is an aesthetic. It is an aesthetic gut reaction to it that it'll probably do what the other things I need to do, and because it's a bit high up, of course I can get the kids in, and I think that's how people went and have bought it.
I mean, essentially, Matteo's right that they're totally different cars, and that the Duke is like any Ferrari. It's just designed to look cool, right? It looks really cool, and there are some people that think it looks ugly. There's some people that think it looks fantastic, but you can't deny it's not cool, right?
Right, it's
cool is valuable. So.
Yeah, the fairer comparison is actually probably between the Qashqai and the Multipla, because those are really sitting in the same category. And the Multipla predated the Qashqai by 10, 15 years, something like that, at least 10 years, of trying to redefine what the family car was. Perhaps, I mean, there's a mixed lesson here, because when the Multipla became more conventional looking, it stopped selling completely rather than only selling a little bit. Whereas the Qashqai did pull that off by being more conventional looking, certainly the first one at least.
But do we think then that there is?
But the Qashqai doesn't have a lot of the brilliance of the Multipla in terms of the package, in terms of what it actually does.
No.
Do you think we're missing that at the moment?
But to be fair,
that we're missing really, really clever packaging.
Well, yeah, but to be fair to Qashqai, no one had ever heard of a Vehicross or seen one. So to the most,
there's only weirdos that know that.
Yeah, it's an incredibly niche thing. So the Qashqai was. I mean, even the press didn't remember the Vehicross. So
no, well, Alan gets that now. If he goes to an event and there's motorcycles, they go. There are still a few that go, hang on, what's one of those? And I didn't have a clue until I got up close, and it's thoroughly wonderful.
I get asked by all sorts of people on Twitter, often journalists.
what is that? Yeah, so the Qashqai did bring that aesthetic to everybody, and the aesthetic that the Qashqai brought, and it's really well explained by the designer Matt Weaver that did it.
Yeah.
That above the, Matt Weaver, right?
It was my yeah.
But if you look above the wheel line, it's a sports car, and below the center of the wheels, it's an off-road. If you divide it in half on the side view, that's very clever. So he actively did the top half like a sporty car, and the bottom half like an SUV, which is again what the Vehicross did. So they borrowed that idea quite wholesale. But no one had ever seen that on a production car. I mean, no one had ever, it's literally, like you said about a Panda falling on a Qashqai is a Mercedes SLK with the bonnet, right? That's landed on top of a Land Rover.
Right.
The two just like do this. And there's a dividing line, which is very clever. No one had ever done that before. And it sounds crazy. And so it was quite groundbreaking in that sense. Multipler, again, brilliant design, because it's not really, the whole design has been thought through. Qashqai's kind of just literally mashing two cars together. But it's still brilliantly designed, I owned one, I loved it. I thought it was just stunning looking thing, but the trunk in it, the boot was tiny. So, but yeah, it looked great. I mean, I remember a good comment when I owned one for a couple of years. We lived on a terraced house, so a house with a bunch of others. Neighbors had an Audi A4. One neighbor had a Porsche 911 and a 3 Series. So it was decent neighbors, right? One guy had a Land Rover Discovery 3. And we moved out of that house. We sold the house. And I sold that Qashqai for a Volvo. And our neighbor with the Audi said to us, "Oh, I'm going to miss that car. It made our street look really rich. It made us look wealthy, this street." And that he's talking about the Qashqai, because he didn't know what it was. He just thought it looked really expensive. And he drove an Audi that cost twice as much as my car. So that's what the Qashqai brought to the family market. Is for 20 over in Finland, it was still pretty cheap, despite our tax, and it looked expensive. And all of my neighbors thought that, which I never expected that. It was really strange. Yeah. I remember thinking, "What? It's a Nissan. How could you think that?" But that's styling, what it can do.
So is the SUV a trend, or is that a thing?
Another example. So if we want to throw out another example of a car with a mismatch between how much it actually costs and what it looks, then I would throw out the Cactus.
Yeah.
Because the Cactus is designed to be cheap. It's designed to cost. It's designed. Everything about it is designed to be cheap. But the design itself just makes it look so much more valuable, and gives it a certain cachet and a certain style and a certain amount of character. I'd love a Cactus if it was a little bit quicker.
Yeah, we went to,
and they're surprisingly small.
Yeah. They're surprisingly small. They're a lot smaller than you think it is.
There's a chap up there who lived a couple of doors up. He had one. He moved into a rented house up the road from us, and I thought they were bigger. All the pictures, the design just gave the impression that everything was bigger, but it's just like it's been shrunk. Like it's 0.75% on the photocopier of what you expect it to be, and it doesn't lose out for that at all. I'm not. No. That's not a complaint. I think it still looks brilliant.
It's got the best interior. I mean, that has a better interior than.
It's not got enough dials and knobs.
Cool, but it's really expensive.
We are raising an interesting point that is as old as the automotive industry itself, or at least as old as car design itself. A car to be successful, you need the people to think they are buying more. They're buying more car than they are paying for.
Yeah,
exactly. And that was the old William Lyons trick. To sell you a Jag that looked $1 million, but it didn't cost $1 million.
Yeah.
It cost half the price of a Bentley. Yeah. But you get an even cooler car. That has always been the trick.
Good design should add value in excess of its cost. That's what I always say. That one of my problems at work is that people often think that the design is making the vehicles expensive, and what they don't realize is that actually just because it looks more expensive than the ugly, I'm talking again about these armored vehicles where most of them aren't designed at all. So it looks more expensive, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is. It doesn't, taking care over which angle you're bending your armored steel at doesn't make it any more expensive than somebody who hasn't taken care of what angle they're bending their armored steel at. The whole idea is just to add value, to make it look more, to make it look expensive, to make it look more valuable than actually it costs.
Yeah.
And all design, that's what all design is about, really.
Yeah. And fashion industry knows this very well. That's what fashion industry is based on, isn't it?
Just ask Primark.
Yeah. Well, that's not really.
No, okay. Yeah.
But like an example of the glasses we're all wearing, all glasses frames cost exactly the same to make in the same factories. But you pay $300-400 for Oakley sunglasses and £5 for some from a supermarket, but they cost the same to manufacture. And this, the styling of them and the brand and everything. Obviously, fashion is a lot more about brand, but some of it is the way it looks. They look better. So, like you say, the magic trick is, and that's what Nissan did with the Qashqai. They were desperate, but they remembered the old trick, is if we're trying to beat the Volkswagen Golf, we just got to give, the Almira platform, they just said, right, let's put a body on it that looks twice as expensive as the Golf because it's flashy SUV. See what happens. And what happened was they had a huge success. Of course they did. It was obvious. It's amazing that, the press thought no one's going to buy this fake SUV. It's two-wheel drive. The customer doesn't care whether it's four-wheel drive or not. No, not in the slightest. It's this argument about front-wheel drive BMWs. Nobody cares.
I passed a two-wheel drive X5 the other day.
A two-wheel drive X5 BMW.
I didn't even know they made a two-wheel drive.
But that's
it's S-Drive. So if it says X-Drive on the side, it's four-wheel drive. It says S-Drive.
Nobody cares.
Who cares? It's an X5.
Yeah. I had
none of them go off-road anyway.
No. I had the two-wheel drive Qashqai in snowy, icy Finland. It doesn't make any difference.
All it means is that you get up to a velocity where you're going to crash more quickly.
Yeah.
Basically it.
In the wrong place, but there you go.
Anyhow, is that a pretty good time to round up, I think?
Yeah.
As I think it's probably working into the morning for some people now.
Yes.
Oh, it's the next day.
Kindly come into our call.
It's Friday, yeah?
No, thank you.
I can't believe it's still light with you, Lee. It's like it's midnight here.
Yeah, same here. But past midnight looks like that out there. So there we go. That's Finland for you. It doesn't get that.
Special Scandinavia, you see.
Yeah.
So, shall we start from left to right? Just quickly give people a chance to find out how to, basically where to find out more about you, follow you on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. Lee, shall we start with you because you're on the left-hand side of my screen?
Okay. Well, I'm on Twitter. I am Eclat521, and then I think everything else. I have a website, and then it links to everything else you can find out about me. So that's. But the other thing I do is on Instagram. I'm Crap Cars of Finland.
It's a really good account, well worth following.
Which is kind of sticking around with me, yeah. And then hopefully you can find out work stuff that I might retweet and things like that. So
cool. Thank you. Nia, you're next from left on my screen. So do you want to?
Yeah, Twitter as always is the best. It's a Nir_Khan. It's NIR_ and KAHN. You need to get the A and the H the right way around, or just look for me somewhere and you'll find me.
And Nir's had a really interesting series on vehicle design on LinkedIn as well. So if you are unfortunate enough to have to use LinkedIn for work, definitely have.
There is a definite reason to go use it now.
There is. It is the only reason to go on LinkedIn. No, there's excellent articles there. I've really enjoyed reading those. So thank you, mate. And there'll be links to all this stuff, of course, in the show notes too. Last but not least, Matteo.
Well, my LinkedIn is pretty boring, so it's not worth really checking out. But the action is on Twitter, of course, when, as you all know all too well, I rant about design and post general geekery about obscure French and Italian cars, especially. So the account, the handle is Roadster Life, Roadster, and yeah, I think there is the low.
Is it Roadster
low bar life, etc. I don't even remember what my handle is.
I'll have it in the show notes. Don't worry about it.
It'll all be in the show notes. Chaps, just quickly, thank you. As we've just said, it's after midnight for at least one of you. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's really been good. Thoroughly enjoyed that, and hopefully you have too.
Yeah, been good fun.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. So everyone at home, don't forget that between now and next week, you can give us any feedback and share your thoughts with the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Don't forget to support the show. The absolute best way, if you can, is to subscribe to our Patreon, which is there's a link at motoringpodcast.com. It's the orange button on the right hand side which says become a patron. If you'd follow that, it tells you all about it. Different levels give you different amounts of stuff back again, because we really do value your support. If you can't do that, then if you could tell a friend, like and review on iTunes or the podcast playing platform of your choice, we really would appreciate that. Andrew, usual ways to get in touch with you. So
Twitter, as it seems to be with everybody else. If you search for Crack Windscreen, you'll find me there. And Alan, if people want to tell you how you're wrong about things, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm always wrong about stuff, and it's at AJP Bradley. That's BRADLEY. Again, on Twitter and also Instagram. We'll be back before very long, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley.
I've been Andrew Clews.
And safe motoring.